Okay, here we go. It looks like we have a quorum, I'm assuming. I'm not really counting. Someone else is. Good. I
We
see
do.
heads
We
nodding.
have a
Thank
quorum.
you. Thank you very much. So this is a Zoom only meeting, and I am the meeting of the WSESD on December 10 will come to order. This meeting is a remote meeting, which means that all of the public body is meeting remotely, where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. If a member of the public or of the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us by email or by text message. In the event of a technical difficulty that cannot be resolved, we may continue the meeting if necessary to time and place certain. Um, Please note that all votes taken during this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call vote in accordance with the law. So just for the record, we are meeting remotely as per Act 133, also known as S55, Section 6, 1 VSA 312A, and it continues for a couple of pages in terms of uh, weather conditions and why we are meeting remotely this evening. So if anyone is in doubt, please refer to that. Um, the board regrets that we are unable to enjoy the hospitality and ambiance of Oak Grove School this evening. But we are grateful that you were on the roster and maybe we can come back and see you and have one of our meetings later this year on site. Um, the next meeting, just a couple of quick announcements. The next meeting is next Tuesday, um, December 17, and that date is not on any calendar. We agreed to that date on the occasion of the November 12th meeting, and it's in the minutes. And that is a meeting where we will focus solely on, um, I believe it's the first draft of the budget at that time. Um, and that meeting on the 17th is taking place at the WRCC in Cusick. Regarding the consent agenda, if um, any board member feels that an item on the consent agenda warrants discussion, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be set aside for discussion. In this way, the consent agenda can be approved in one motion. That request should be made now or before we come to the consent agenda. Again, a reminder that if there's an item on the agenda, it is subject to potential action without a notation on the agenda saying that. Are there any amendments to the agenda as everyone sees it?
Could I just make a comment?
Yes, Sean, absolutely.
So,
Thank you.
um, the, on the budget timeline,
Yes.
it's, line number 17, first comprehensive draft budget presentation to the board,
Mhm,
12/17. So
mhm.
it is actually on the budget timeline, just as a point of interest.
Oh, thank you. Okay, you must be looking at a rewrite because I'm looking at the original one that we got. And 1217. Oh, so it is. You're absolutely right. Thank you very much. I see it. Thanks, Sean. Okay. Um, Anything else before we get into this? Okay, let's just to announce both Ann Beekman and Kim Price are functioning as co-hosts um, for this meeting. And one more item before we get to student matters. Um, because our next meeting is next Tuesday with very little turnaround, as this meeting ends, I'm putting together the agenda for the next meeting. I am officially asking board members to send all issues that you'd like to see posted on this next agenda. Please send them out to me so that I get it by tomorrow evening. I'm not going to send an email reminder about that. I'm just going to ask everybody to stay on top of that and get it to me. Thank you. Um, okay. If there are no amendments to the agenda, let's go to student matters. This is a time for students to share their views, their comments, their questions. So please, if there's students in the space, raise your hand if you would like a moment or two. And I see no student hands at this point. So I'm going to move on to the next item, which is public comment on non-agenda items. And I'm just going to read the introduction. This is a time for the board to listen and to take notes. It is not a time for the board to respond to comments or to engage in dialogue with the public. If appropriate, the board and administration will work on next steps. So public comment on non-agenda items. Please use the react button on the bottom of your screen and it will enable you to raise your hand. Okay, we'll give it another few seconds and then I'm going to move on. Okay, I am going to move on. The next section under board matters is Leadership Council updates. And I would just like to take a moment to thank Ruby McAdoo for the email that she sent to every board member. It's a summary having to do with teacher appreciation. And we had asked her at the last meeting, she volunteered, to put together a survey. It's a strong email. The survey is there, and I presume the results go to you, directly to you, Ruby. Right, I see nodding. I've already sent out my copy to the Dummerston Leadership Council, asking them to share it widely in the school community and to respond as quickly as possible. I am asking, and I think Ruby, in your email, uh, you indicate that we want to resolve this by the end of January. So I want this resolved on the occasion of the January 28th um, meeting. So, and if any board member wants to modify Ruby's email, that is your prerogative. Please do so. So there's no need to spend time talking about that this evening. Um, Tim, is your hand up on this issue or on a different issue having to do with
It's
leadership
a
councils?
BAM's LC update.
Okay, BAM's LC, please go right ahead.
Okay, so first, BAMS is extremely proud of its achievement of 61% in proficiency scores for English language. This is higher than last year, and of course, the goal is for 100%, but this is a really nice accomplishment. So congratulations to the staff and administration at BAMS. Also, Principal Lyman has sent out a survey to LC members and members of the BAMS community to develop a vision statement for the school and to develop the school's
Mhm,
core values around safety and
mhm,
community.
mhm.
Next, there will be an
Can I
action.
just stop you 1 second? I do believe Keith Lyman sent that email to all of us on the board.
Oh, good.
Um, isn't that correct?
I
Okay.
must have missed it.
No, I'm just looking for nods, and I see nods going around. This is regarding the vision statement, and it's a reminder to me to respond to that. Thank you. Okay, next item, Tim.
There will be an ad posted in the spring for an open foreign language position in either Spanish or French. So we should use our networks if we know anybody looking for a job in foreign language at BAMS. Next, we had a good discussion of winter sports and how there's a need to add skating at the Memorial Park rink for students who may not have the equipment or desire to ski. So that's going to be a nice winter sport event. And finally, BAMS is very proud of its Red Ticket program, which engages students in Project Feed the Thousands. As I understand it, when a student does something well, they get a red ticket that goes into a jar. And maybe Matt, you can fill in, but somehow it's translated into money for Project Feed the Thousands. And last, I just wanted to acknowledge Keith and Rich Levy and all the LC members, including Matt Shibley, for establishing a really good, solid leadership council. Matt, do you have anything to add? Matt is a parent at the LC.
No, just again, really echoing the same things you said, Tim. Very impressed with what BAMS is doing and the red ticket program, and particularly, I just want to echo. I think a couple of meetings ago, Keith's commitment to kindness, and I think that's so important for social emotional learning. I love what they're doing. So great job, BAMS.
It really is.
Okay, thank you. I'm raising my hand. This is a reminder to the board. Early Education Services, EES, lacks a board representative to their LC. I raised it at the last meeting, and I'm putting that out again. We have 10 sites. We have 10 board members. So I haven't gone down the list, but if perhaps there is a board member who is not a leadership council representative, um, it would be great if everybody could take on a leadership council. If not, it may be a situation where someone needs to double up. I cannot double up. I just can't. Um, so please keep that in mind. And if I don't hear from anybody, I will certainly raise it at the next board meeting. Um, Somehow I can't really see the top row of hands. Let's see what I'm doing here. I still can't see. Oh
Ruby
yeah.
has her hand
Okay.
up there.
I do realize. Yeah. Okay, Ruby. Yes.
I wanted to just share that I emailed to Deborah that I served as the EES representative, and I think they're a delightful group, and Deb Gass is wonderful to work with. Um, I don't really feel like I have a lot of time in my schedule to add
So
another thing.
let's leave it out there for the moment
Yeah,
without.
but I feel a little I feel a little like why aren't we finding out who like should I feel like we should all be stepping forward with assignments, and I'm not sure why we're whoever it is that doesn't have it, even if it's just kind of like mea culpa or I don't have the time, I don't want it, like something to just say, here's where we are. I have not really done, like scoured to say who is not have something assigned, but I do know that I took on two in order to take it off the chair at one point, but that was years ago. So I don't know what happened, but anyway, so that's I will step forward if I need to, but I'd love to not have to need to.
Let's take a look at what exists on the website and see whether the listing is correct or not. And it may be something that we should take up at the next board meeting very quickly, just to confirm that people are actually at the schools that are on the website. And we'll see where we go from there. But uh, based upon what Ruby just said, please send me an email if it's beyond the scope of what you can handle at the moment. So we just know who's doing what. Eva, I see your hand up.
So I had the early education services. It's in the middle of the afternoon, and my kid's schedule changed, so I could not accommodate that meeting time. So I did CC Tim in that email because he had said that he could take it. So that was just my that's the reason why. Otherwise, it's a wonderful group, and if I could change my kid's schedule for pickup, I would love to keep it, but I just can't.
Eva,
Yeah,
wait 1 second, Tim. Eva, I do believe you have Oak Grove as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have Oak Grove, and
Right.
that's in the
Yes.
evening
Yes.
time, and
Yeah.
that works
Right.
really well.
Right.
But that lunchtime,
Yeah.
it's just not possible.
Okay. So you
uh,
have an assigned LC. I have an assigned LC. Tim, you wanted to say something?
yeah, there's only two more meetings before we reseat new board members and redo this whole thing. Ruby, I'll take you off the hook. I'll do it for the next 2 months. So no more discussion. I got EECES.
Okay. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you,
All
Tim.
right. Anything else having to do with leadership council updates? All right. And we're going to move on to board subcommittees and supervisory union updates. Um, Ruby, I know that there's an issue. I believe you sent it around to everybody on the board, and it's going to come up tomorrow night at the SU meeting, and it has to do with food services. So just because I'm going to keep this meeting as tight as possible in terms of timing, give us a very brief update,
Yeah.
please. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. I am on an ad hoc committee um, that is focusing on evaluating and making a proposal uh, towards moving to an independent nutrition food system in our district. And that is it's kind of an ad hoc committee that came out of the Farm to School Committee, which is a district-wide farm to school committee. So I'm raising it today because this really highly impacts the supervisory union budget, which is going to be reviewed tomorrow. This is a major change in our district in terms of delivery of nutrition and food, staffing in our kitchens. It's a sea change that is being proposed by the this particular committee. There's a report. It's been sent to all of the boards. It's been sent to the leadership councils and the administration. And it is going to be considered directly tomorrow at the SU meeting. And I do believe that there's budget information that will be presented tomorrow that will reflect what a shift of this nature will mean. And I also think that the existing food service program will be in attendance and will be advocating in whatever capacity for their for their relationship to continue. So it will be interesting to see how it shakes out. And I don't know, I don't know that there's much more to talk about in this group. We're related. It affects us deeply, but it is not actually an SD decision,
Right.
SU decision.
Right. I thank you for that. And I do think it goes to the issue that has come up on occasion, the relationship between the SD and the SU and the overlapping nature of it. Mark Spino.
Yeah, on a related note, Frank and I have been meeting with Susan Grabowski and Mary Lou Steiner outside of this committee meetings. They've been keeping us up to steam on the developments, and we have collectively put a budget together to support the proposal, and
Mhm.
we'll have those figures available tomorrow night for
Great.
discussion. And I do believe Chris Farrow is planning to attend the beginning of the meeting, like he did recently at a very recent SU meeting.
Well, I think that everybody should tune in to tomorrow night's meeting, wherever that meeting will be held. Thank you, Mark. Uh, Anything else? Board subcommittees and SU updates.
Deborah, I have the SU very briefly.
Good. Thank you very much, Anne.
We had our initial review of special education budget, which is currently up 5.9%, driven by student needs. And the single largest cost driver associated is tuition costs for students that we are not able to educate in our schools. So 5.9 is actually a fairly conservative budget. And I just wanted you all to know that. The update on electric buses is that we require 18 of them. And while Vernon has been awarded 3, we can't move forward with infrastructure costs until we have a whole fleet. So next round begins in January, and we'll see what happens and make a determination in May. We're also drafting a policy on contract negotiations, and I think that covers just about everything.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And I do hope folks will show up for the food meeting tomorrow, because it could be very interesting.
Yes, and it does affect students in our district. It affects every school in our district. So, yes, for those of us who are on the SU, we will of course be there. But I think it behooves everyone to tune in at least at the beginning of the meeting. Can I just confirm, is Tracy here? Or yes, she is. Perfect. I just want to make sure in terms of notes and whatnot. But of course,
we got groceries in the back.
Okay, someone is not muted. And I appreciate
just muted him.
I'm glad the groceries have arrived. Let's see. Next item, if I'm going to move on. Board subcommittees and SU, I'm moving on. I don't see any hands. Okay. Item C, as in Charlie, the board retreat. This is just a heads up to everybody. It's taking place on January 13. It'll again be in Cusick. We'll do food in the same way, and it's to sort of wrap up the conversation that we initiated on November 18. Mary Gannon, again, will be our moderator. Item D, Sean, your hand is up. Yes. Regarding the board retreat. Sorry, I did not mean to go too quickly over that, and you are muted right now, Sean. So please unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm sorry.
That's right. Yes.
So yes, as I expressed before, I'm a little conflicted about the idea of a board retreat. I'm just looking at the tax commissioner's letter. He uses words such as unsustainable, unprecedented, in terms of education spending in the state of Vermont and what it's going to mean. The yield is down to 8,553, which is, 2 years ago it was 15,000. So that means the lower the yield, the higher the tax rate. So in light of the dire situation that we're running into as far as fiscal responsibility, I would be in favor of not doing this retreat. It would save the district $800. And the it just seems to me that it would behoove us not to do it. The board budget is just under $250,000. As of now, we have expended, I think, 100 and I can't remember exactly, but I'm just concerned that yes, it might be valuable, but I'm concerned about the monetary impact. And if all the teachers, if everybody's asked to cut, this might be a place for the board to say, okay, we'll do it some other way, and make it less expensive. Thank you.
Okay, I certainly would love to see a breakdown of the board budget. I did not realize that our budget was that high, and I
I
would
have
be
it
interested.
right here, actually.
Okay, well,
The FY 25 budget is $248,871.40, so just under $250,000. The expenditures so far this year is $95,524, and the encumbrance is $4,992. So to break it down, $250,000, about 150,000 have been spent, which leaves a remaining amount of just about 150,000. So my concern is that we have a budget for the board, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we'd have to spend that whole budget. If we don't spend the budget, then the money can be rolled back into the general fund or the capital fund. And then all of those monies will go towards student, student achievement, student support. So
okay.
those are my reasonings. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sean. Tim?
Yeah, I really appreciate Sean's concern about lean budget and watching every dollar that we spend in the budget. But in my opinion, I just think that the board has to do a self-evaluation that has to set goals. The outcomes of good retreat are just way too valuable to be concerned about $800. So I think that, in my opinion, it would be money very, very well spent.
Okay. Anyone else for discussion? Christina Naylor?
Oops, thank you, Director Stanford. I'm just trying to get my video. There we go. I echo Director Murphy's concerns about expenditures. If there's things that can be $800 seems like a good value. And I don't I have not, I apologize. I don't know what the retreat will be about, but I also think that this board will have to make really challenging decisions over the coming months about the budget. And if there's work that can be done to help bring the board to work cohesively, to work collaboratively together and with administration, it is money well spent because I believe better decisions will be made by groups that are all rowing in the same direction. Um, by all means, do not spend the money if you don't have to. I think anybody who knows me knows I feel that way. And so anything we can do to cut down expenses, legal expenses, anything, talk fast with the lawyers. But if I do think $800, if the goal of this is to move forward more cohesively and more collaboratively together and with administration and with teachers and with the public, I think it's money well spent. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call on board members as I saw hands raised. Matt Shibley.
Thanks. I echo the sentiment, and I think it would be wise for us to be cautious and judicious about how we're spending our money. I would encourage board members to consider whether or not a potluck would be warranted here. I brought it up before. I certainly would be supportive of it and would be happy to navigate the logistics of a potluck should the board be interested in moving in that direction.
Thank you very much. That would certainly bring our expenses down to $500. Thank you. I saw Eva Nolan next. Yes, Eva.
I'm still thinking, so maybe somebody else can go before me.
Absolutely. Okay, I will come back to you. Brian Reamer.
Thank you, Deborah. Um, I I'm in favor of a retreat if I know for certain what the goal or the objective of it is. Um, I think what we did last time was helpful, but I don't recall having a very specific goal or outcome intended. I think it helps us justify what we're doing if we can articulate that, and it helps us focus our work once we get there. So if we do it, I want to see a more firm reason for doing it or goal or objective that we're trying to achieve. I also want to support Matt's suggestion that if we do have it, a potluck would be perfectly okay with me and could save us at least something and show some good faith to our community members.
Okay, thank you very much. Eva, did you want to go now or?
Yeah, I just the concept of the retreat, which is technically not a retreat because we do it on site. Retreat means doing it off site. We do it on site, and we've never gone off site in order to save money. I would say that if we're going to be reflective about the retreat spending, we should be reflective of all retreat spending. That means admin retreat, that means board admin retreat, and that means our retreat as well. Community has asked, and this was a touchy subject last year, but I will bring it up again for it to be done locally to invigorate the local economy. And people have asked for us to do it all on site. So my only thing is, if you're going to if you want to really analyze this, let's analyze all of it.
I'm going to take a moment to pipe in my own view briefly. I agree wholeheartedly. I agree with the idea of a potluck, and I think that this concern should be universal. We have school sites. We do not need to go outside of the buildings that already exist in the district for any retreat. There is value, we've certainly talked about this, in having a retreat off-site. It changes the energy, but these are times for a need to be very careful about how we spend money. Eva, your hand is still up. Did you finish, or did you want to say something additional?
That's it. That's all.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Sean, your hand is up.
Thank you. I was just wondering, maybe you should let Jody and Christina speak, because I'd be interested in making a motion to see and bring it to a vote.
Right, right. Okay. So let's give it a minute then. Jody, you have your hand up.
Am I okay now?
You are. We can hear you.
Well, I have it all set to put unmute and then the picture moves. I agree wholeheartedly with Eva that if you're going to look at this measly $800 in a whole 65 or whatever it is $1 million budget, the school board is nothing, is peanuts. So I would go ahead with what you are. You're doing a good job of that. I think that we need to, well, you need to, and we will later need to look at some of the raises that have happened in administration and elsewhere. I think there are other items to look at, and $800, forget it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Before I take this back to Sean, any other raised hands? Any other comments? Okay. Sean, you had your hand up before?
Yes, I did, but I lowered it. If somebody else would like to make the motion, because
all right. Yeah, I think
I shouldn't make it a negative view.
Okay.
So if somebody makes the motion.
Is someone willing to make a motion? And I see Matt Shibley's hand up. Matt?
Madam Chair, I move that the board go forward with our retreat as scheduled, and that we shift it to a potluck to save money.
Mhm.
Second.
Thank you, Kim. Any discussion? Okay. All right. So the motion again is that we move forward with the retreat as scheduled on January 13, and that we do it as a potluck. And the retreat is scheduled to be on site at Cusick. Bringing it to a vote as of this point, and I'm just going to go ahead with a roll call vote at this point. Did everyone understand the motion? And if, as we go through the vote, if anyone needs to hear the motion again to be crystal clear about what you're voting on, please stop me and we'll do that. Ann Beekman.
Aye.
Tim Maceo.
Aye.
Ruby McAdoo.
Aye.
Sean Murphy.
No.
Eva Nolan.
I abstain. I'm not going to be able to meet that meeting time.
Okay, Kim Price.
Aye.
Brian Reamer.
Aye.
Colleen Savage.
Colleen is absent.
Colleen is absent. Okay, absent. Thank you. Matt Shibley.
Aye.
Okay, Deborah Stanford, aye. Okay, that is that's 7 in favor. So we will have a retreat on the 13th. Okay, and I will certainly look to clarify the objectives and the goals as per Brian Reamer's appropriate comment. Thank you. Okay. We are up to early education services. This is an application that Deb Gass made me aware of for Head Start and early Head Start services.
Thank you, Deborah. Yes, this is the application I've been talking about now for a while, which is our reapplication. And we are in a competitive pool this time around. So it is an extensive application. And it will be submitted in time for the January 6th deadline. And I'm here tonight to ask for your authorization to submit the application to continue providing Head Start and Early Head Start in Windham County for 136 children for a total funding amount of $3,483,627. The scope is really just a continuation of what we are currently doing, with the exception of shifting a few of our partnership slots from the Mulberry Bush Early Learning Center over to our new Brattleboro Early Learning Center that will start a new collaborative classroom in September. Everything else is at this point proposed to continue as we're doing today. And I just want to note that we will be including with the application an updated copy of our most recently created or updated strategic plan. And the 4 goals in that plan are that all children are ready for school. EES will have a well-compensated and effective workforce. EES will strive for maximum family participation across all program areas. And we will optimize the use of technology and data to drive decision-making in all areas. So I am asking for your permission to submit that application.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. The email that you sent talked about the next 5-year cycle. So the 3,483,627, is that for this next year only?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes.
And is there a difference between this year and next year's cost?
No,
No.
no.
Okay.
This is the amount we were actually, this is what we get currently. The reality is that it's quite possible somewhere in the next, usually in the spring, we see a cost of living increase. There's no way of, at this point, knowing what that is. So the most we can hope for at this point in time is what we currently receive, which is that amount.
Okay. Questions from the board? Okay, I have another question. Just to clarify, we did not receive your proposal, did we?
You did not, because I'm still writing it.
Okay, you're still writing it.
Yes.
Okay. So at this point, are we, I realize that you need a motion for approval at this point, and your deadline is January 6th.
Correct. That's a submission date, yes.
That's a submission date, and you need our approval before that January 6th date.
Yes.
You
And
do.
I will, as we've done in the past, I will need to get that in writing from you, Deborah, as part
Right.
of the grant application.
Okay, yeah, and that you will send me. I sign off on that.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Comment from the board? Sean?
Yeah, I'd be willing to make that motion. I think it's, since the deadline is January 6th, and since Head Start is such an important program, since the funding of it is much larger than this district, a lot of federal funds, state funds. I would move that the WSESD board move ahead with the proposal that Deb Gas has stated in the amount of 3 million, and then I don't have the
$483,627.
Thank you, Deborah.
Yes. Okay.
Second.
Okay. I hear Kim seconding it. Thank you. It's open for discussion at this point. So my only concern is that we are voting without actually seeing the proposal. That would be my only concern. I am comfortable voting contingent upon receiving the proposal. Is the board that would be, I guess, a friendly amendment to Sean's motion to add that in contingent upon receiving the proposal. Is the board comfortable with that? Do we have to? Okay, I see thumbs up. I see. I don't know. Do we have to vote on the amendment? Someone help me out with what we're doing with Robert's rules at this point.
If we want to go crisply by the book, we need to vote on the friendly amendment.
Which was my doing.
Correct.
Right. So then the friendly amendment would be something on the order that we approve the amount of $3,483,627 contingent upon receipt of the proposal. That's the friendly amendment.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
So the proposal is 150 pages. And it's a lot of collecting of documents and getting letters of support and all that kind of thing. And so really we're going to be punching this to the deadline. And so how much time, I mean, we have it in a Google Share Drive, several people working on it. I can share that with the board members, or, in what.
Okay, here's what I would like. Here's what I would like. I would like an email. I'm gonna tweak my friendly amendment to say that we approve this amount of money contingent upon an email from you, Deb Gass, with this amount of money, with the number of students, just some cover document. Not a big deal, a few sentences that just establishes exactly what we're voting on. email from you.
Yep, and that can come tomorrow. That I have for you. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So, and I know that will come. So I don't even know if we need a friendly amendment at this point. It's going to come tomorrow. I'm very comfortable with that. I withdraw my friendly amendment. Does that make sense?
No secondary vote necessary.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so now we're back to Sean's motion, which is, Sean, would you say it again, please?
Yeah. I would just like to say that I believe, it's my understanding from what Frank and Deb have said in the past, there's not a direct financial implication to the WSESD
right.
in this matter. So it's a service provided. The provided service actually extends beyond our district, and it is the actual monetary aspect of it does not include the WSESD. Is that correct?
That is correct, Sean. The board does have a direct relationship, though.
Okay, wait one second. Wait one second. Keith, can you mute yourself? That may be the issue here that just happened. Okay, Deb, try again.
Okay. Yep.
Here we go. Okay.
So the board has governance responsibility. And you're correct, Sean. The financial impact does not affect the district. But the district is actually the grantee, and EES is your designee. And so the discussion that you had earlier about membership, having a board member participate in policy council is critical. It's mission critical because it's part of the governance structure of Head Start. And so ultimately, you are responsible for the provision of services and guaranteeing that, the fiscal oversight is done correctly and all of that. But financially, the funding is very separate from.
So that is that was. I like things in writing, especially when I'm voting. So that will be forthcoming. Sean, the motion again, please.
I move that the WSESD board move forward to approve the amount that has been presented by the director of EES, Deb. That's it.
Thank you.
I move that we move forward with the acceptance of the responsibility.
Okay, and it was seconded by Kim. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion as stated by Sean Murphy, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any opposed, please indicate by saying no. Any abstentions? Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Next item. We have the issue about a common reading, something, a text that would be read by administrators and by board members in keeping with what began last year. We read the governance core. So that's open for brief discussion. So Matt, thank you. You want to start us off?
My submission for the board for potential reading includes the book Boards That Lead, When to Take Charge, When to Partner, and When to Stay Out of the Way. The book is co-authored by Ram Charan, Dennis Carey, and Michael Useem. It was first published in 2014. The book provides valuable insights on the role of corporate boards and guiding organizations, emphasizing the delicate balance between involvement and oversight. It discusses when boards should take a more active role in decision-making, when they should partner with the executives, administration, and when they should give administration the freedom to lead without inference. Charan, Carey, and Useem, all of whom have extensive experience in leadership and governance, draw on case studies and research to offer practical advice on how boards can enhance organizational effectiveness, improve governance, and ensure long-term success. It seems to be a useful resource for directors, executives, educators, and anyone interested in governance. It seems to be more geared toward the corporate world, but I wonder if there could be valuable insights from how a board and administration executives could work better together more effectively. So that's my submission. I haven't read this book, so I can't attest to its veracity, but I felt like the board needed to have a couple options. So here's one.
Okay. And I was at an affinity group yesterday, and I raised this issue with the individuals in that room, that Zoom session. And I have ordered a couple of books in order to take a look at them at my expense. I will not bill it back to the district. One is, and I don't have, oh, Lisa Del Pitt. It's Teaching When the World is on Fire. And I believe that is a series of essays. And the other is Equity from the Boardroom to the Classroom by Patrick Rice. I don't have anything to say about the books. I would love for a few of us to get together and talk about the texts that Matt is recommending, as well as just sit and quickly browse the books that I've just ordered. And so that we can sort of come back to the board with a couple of suggestions and then we make a decision about it. Tim, you have your hand up.
So at the last meeting, I mentioned the education quality standards. This is something that, as board members, responsible board members, we simply have to read it anyway. It's just part of our job to know what the AOE is expecting of the district. Along with that is the district quality standards, which is another document which, again, we have to read these. The district quality standards outlines all the responsibilities that the board must work towards achieving, with the understanding that every 3 years, school boards in Vermont will be assessed, and the AOE will assess our school board on the basis of how well we're meeting the district quality standards and the education quality standards. Now, so I was reading the education quality standards. Both of these documents, by the way, are around 20 pages, so that's it's not really hard reading. But the education quality standards, the purpose is to ensure that all Vermont students are afforded educational opportunities that are substantially equal in quality and are equitable, anti-racist, culturally responsive, and anti-discriminatory. So I was reading about this and then I was thinking about, well, yeah, anti-racist. It's something that we talk about on occasion we talk about it a lot. But I was thinking to give a deeper understanding, a deeper appreciation of that goal. I thought, well, this is the 100th anniversary of 100th birthday of James Baldwin. So I was reading Baldwin thinking, well, he'd be a good reader, a good one to assign. But then I thought, why not somebody more contemporary? Which brought me to the reading that I'm proposing, and that is Te Nehasi Coates' Letter to My Son. And this is, well, it's not a book. It was an essay in the Atlantic in 2015, and it's a powerful read. I read it many years ago, and I reread it, and there's no doubt about it. It's very disturbing for some. It's uncomfortable to be reminded of American history, of our history of racism and so on. So, and it's actually it's about 8,400 words, so it's not terribly long. But Code Letter to My Son presents a deep, a poignant understanding of the Black experience in America. It offers us conversations about race, history, and justice or injustice. It really fosters critical thinking and empathy, things that we want to model to our students and the community. But there's no doubt about it. It's the kind of essay that I imagine would be banned by many communities across this country, because because it speaks about uncomfortable truths. So I I recommend Letter to My Son, first of all, to anybody, whether it's a reading that we choose or not. I hope that some of you read it, and I would love to kick it around, to really discuss it with you after you read it. But I make this recommendation with urging one or two board members to just take a look at it. Maybe you don't want to read the whole thing, but read a few paragraphs to get a sense of the value of this piece. It's a powerful piece. I think, actually, honestly, I think every educator in America should read it. But that's my opinion.
Okay. Um, so rather than tossing all of this around right now, let's come back to it at our January board meeting, early January, the first one. I would, I don't know if how board members feel about my suggestion that maybe three of us, two of us, we can do it via Zoom, get together and present our thoughts in a small group so that we make as concise a recommendation to the entire board as possible. I don't know if the board is comfortable with a small group of us doing that. So comment, please, from the board on that issue. Ruby?
I really appreciate everybody's suggestions, and I think that Deborah's proposal that a handful of us kind of think about it and come back with a more concise plan, because you could just throw spaghetti on the wall with these. All of these are good options, all of them, and I don't want to be part of that group because I want three of you to be, and I trust you all implicitly. So, but I do think, Deborah, um, that I having more than just one person making a proposal to the board is a good idea. But yeah, so I agree.
Okay. Okay. Sean?
Yeah, I would think that I would have to say that Tim's suggestion is an excellent one for a number of reasons. It's not very long. We could just, instead of deliberating about what we should do, we should just do it, get a hold of it somehow. It must be available, and read it. And it sounds like it would be something that would be, we could just do it. Students.
Okay, Sean, Tim came up with two things. One
Well,
was
no, the Atlantic piece.
okay,
The Atlantic piece is what I think
okay.
would be excellent.
Okay, Ta-Nehisi Coates' Letter to My Son.
Yes.
Yeah, which is an adaptation from his more extended text entitled Between the World and Me. So, okay. Ruby, your hand is up. No, you don't want it up. Okay. It's up to the board. How do you want to handle it? Do you want to go with this, with these two suggestions right now from Tim? and just move forward in that way.
One thing I was wondering is, I'm in a book group in Guilford, and the librarian gets all the copies from pulling it in from all different sources around the state of Vermont. So it might be possible to do that with, if it's an actual book form that Tim mentioned. I don't know.
It's the book is much longer, and the Atlantic article is an abbreviated form of, and it's really, I think, as I did a compare and contrast, it's just the first section of the book itself. Tim, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so it's available for free. I can send it out to everybody if you want. But I really don't want to be responsible for suggesting this book without some collaboration. You mentioned 2 or 3 people. I would really want collaboration with 1 or 2 other board members
Okay.
because it could be very disturbing for some people.
Okay. Thank you. Eva?
Oh, I guess that's different now, but I was just going to say I support Sean on moving it forward. And I already read it, and I think that it was profound. And I thank Tim for the recommendation.
Okay. So Tim made a recommendation, and he's also suggesting that a few of us get together and just take a close read and take a look at it. So I'm I'm going to suggest that we go in that direction, knowing that by our first board meeting in January, which I think is on the 14th, if I'm not mistaken, we we've we come forward with something. So if board members are comfortable with that, can I have a couple of volunteers to do that? Brian, are you raising your hand to volunteer? Thank you very much. And anybody else?
Tim has his hand raised, Deborah.
No, I have him down.
Okay.
I have Tim, I have Brian. Sean? That's a yes from you? That's a yes, Sean. Okay. Okay, good. Tim, Brian, and Sean. And I will also get those books out as soon as I will loan them out. They belong to me. So I expect them back, and I expect them back in pristine condition. Ooh, did I really say that on recording? Ooh, tells you how I feel about my library. Okay, moving on, if you don't mind. Tim, your hand is up. Did you want to say something
No, I'm
more?
trying to lower it.
Okay, I will ignore your hand until you start waving it. Um, I'm going to move on to other business. There is just one final issue. We received an application, meaning the district received an application for sabbatical leave. And as per the union contract, the school board is required to appoint one member to evaluate the proposal along with the superintendent and a union appointee. So I need a school board volunteer for that. Do I see your hand, Matt Chibley?
Yep, I would certainly volunteer.
Okay. And Ruby, did you have your hand up for that as well?
No, I had my hand up for a question.
Okay, about this.
About this.
Good. Go for it, Ruby.
I think Matt's a great choice. Thank you. But I guess I was wondering, we have an HR committee, correct? Is it, I don't understand exactly what the HR committee does, but it kind of felt like this is a good task for individuals who serve in that capacity. And so that was my question. That being said, I don't know, Matt, if you were on that committee, I think you're a great choice, but that was my question.
Okay, I'm at a little bit of a loss in terms of our HR committee.
Do you mean personnel?
Oh, you mean personnel?
That's
Okay.
that's
You're talking about the person at the standing committee, like policy and amendment. That's what you're talking about.
yeah,
Yeah, yes.
I think
Okay.
so.
Okay. I think this is something different. And rather than getting into a discussion about personnel this evening, I'm going to move forward with Matt Chibley, if you don't mind, on this. Thank you. So you and Superintendent Mark Spino will be in touch with each other. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, fiscal report. It is 7:05 right now. Frank, can I ask you a question? Are you there, Frank, somewhere?
Yep, I am here.
Thank you very much, Frank. Can I, how much time do you need on this?
I think Sean was going to do an overview of the finance committee, and we were talking about probably 15 minutes.
Okay, all right. Okay, let's stay on track with this, please, because we need to get to the presentation having to do with community schools. So if we can sit tight for 15 minutes, then we'll take a break. And if that's okay with board members, or do we need a break right now? Okay, thank you all for responding so quickly. That was great. Sean, you want to take it away, please?
Yeah, yeah, thank you very much. The Finance Committee has been very well attended this year. So we've had members of the public, we've had a quorum of the Finance Committee, we've had administrators, and of course, Frank Rucker. I don't know how we do it without him. So it's been really good. So on they're all under the budget planning timeline, and it's called the draft budget review. And we've had 3 meetings of great importance. The first one was on November 19th, and it had to do with the elementary school budgets. As you know, all of the elementary schools in the district, and the increase is 1%. So the increase is about $400,000. So that's an extremely modest increase. 1%. I think that everybody looked very carefully and tried to figure out a way that they could present their budgetary needs at the elementary level in a very responsible manner. On November 25th, the Finance Committee met and dealt with the secondary education budget. That budget is up 1.3%, a total of $350,000 increase, which once again, 1.3% increase is extremely responsible. So that was that. And then on December 2nd, the committee met again, and the topic of that evening was revenues and capital plan. And I looked at the revenue over. I'm going to let Frank actually speak to the revenue because I was a little confused by I think there's an increase in revenue of 3%. But has been compensatory reduction in the capital plan. As everybody knows, the FY25 and during FY25 and FY24, all the grants from the ESSER and the ARPA funds were available to the district. And all those funds were extremely well utilized in a number of things. One very important things would be the infrastructure work that has happened in all the buildings to make it more compliant with the with the fresh air and all that. So and really good student learning environments. And so the there's a decrease in capital plan because for FY26 from FY25, because we were able to do all the important things, or a lot of the important things that had to be done in terms of infrastructure. So, and then I'll touch very briefly on the letter that I referred to before. It's the letter that's sent out by statute by the tax commissioner and we received our letter on December 2nd, and Frank presented it to the finance committee. And I won't go into that in great detail, but as it very often happens with that letter, it's very sobering. It's a very sobering letter. So I'll let Frank elaborate. Thank you.
Okay. Before I turn it over to Frank, Ruby, you have your hand up. Did you? No? Nothing. Okay, got it. Frank?
Okay, yeah. So Sean is referring to reference to the tax commissioner's reference to the yield. The yield is the number that the whole state uses to compare the board spendings per student to, and then calculate a tax rate. So when the yield goes down, as Sean has alluded to, that puts pressure on the tax rate. And in this case, as you may recall in the commissioner's letter, we're going from 9,893 in this year to 8,553 next year. Now, in that letter, they also refer to the fact that the legislature has thrown in another adjustment on the way in which we communicate with the public, the way in which tax rates get translated, and the commissioner's letter basically says they're not directly comparable. However, the gist of what Sean has just said is still true in that the yield does not appear to provide us with any relief as we plan for fiscal year 26. In that letter, just to kind of give you context to that excellent overview Sean just gave us, you heard Sean mention that our elementary budgets are projected to be up 1%, secondary up 1.3%. In that tax commissioner letter, they're projecting statewide spending to be up 5.9%. So you can see we've been very assertive in being fiscally responsible. It reflects at this point between the secondary and the elementary budgets. We've discussed 13 positions that have been not carried in this proposal, and that's how we get to these very low growth spending assumptions. On the other hand, I should mention we're concurrently developing the Windham Southeast Supervisory Union budget, which is primarily consists of the special education, and that is net is assessed to the district. So I will be updating that data in the next couple of days. And that supervisory union spending budget is actually up that same statistic, just coincidentally, it is up 5.9%, which is, similar to the state projected average for all spending. So maybe the only thing I would add to Sean's report is for folks that attended the finance committee, we spent a lot of time on district goals. That was very much an outcome of the admin and board planning retreat around looking at how our kids are doing, looking at where we need to improve in proficiency and literacy and in math, and then also on some of our climate goals. So that is absolutely central to all of the planning that we've done. The last thing I'll mention is we finally have gotten a preliminary long-term weighted average statistic from the Agency of Ed. That's essentially the equivalent of what was formerly referred to as equalized students. It's the same concept. It's the applied weights to our enrollment. And again, that's the other critical statistic, the yield. And the long-term weighted average student statistic is what we need in order to calculate our fiscal impact on our taxpayers. The preliminary number for long-term weighted average is favorable from the point of view that it's up about 2%. However, the correspondence I've received from the agency just in the last couple of days is indicating that it is an incomplete number and it is not at all final. So this is typical this time of year where we're working with the agency to try to help them get to a final statistic. As that is available, I will be integrating that into the Windham Southeast School District proposed budget for fiscal year 26. And I will send out a comprehensive draft of everything that Sean has just reviewed to the board as soon as I can. And that would be for the meeting of December 17.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. And without doubt, that meeting, December 17, it will be devoted to budgetary issues. That's the purpose of that meeting. So I'm going to sort of qualify what I said earlier. Please send me your issues for that for next week's meeting. Let's keep our issues really tightly constrained because we need to devote an entire meeting to budgetary issues and asking all those questions that we have. We are going to go over all of this again next week for sure. And hopefully next week we will be sitting in a room together, and that makes it so much easier when we're looking at paper and a screen in a very shared space. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Frank.
You're welcome.
I am going, if there is no comment from board members, I am going to move on. And why don't we take a 10-minute break at this point? Okay, let's take a stretch break. It is 7:18. So let's come back 7:28. Is that okay with everybody? Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to come back. And Rachel Glickman, you will have our full attention at that point. So, Anne, can you put on, thank you very much. Okay, so we are returning to the board meeting of December 10, and we are about to engage with Rachel Glickman, a presentation that I listed on the agenda as community schools. And we can see what the title of the presentation is on screen right now. Rachel.
Yes, I can provide a little bit of an explanation for that.
Now, I have one question for you, just in terms of organizing your presentation. Would you like the board to hold questions until the end, jot them down?
Yeah, that would be great. So I prepared, this is going to be a test of Zoom endurance because I was told to present a 30-minute presentation, which I have. So everyone hang in there. I'll try to make it as engaging as possible as a teacher. And then 15 minutes afterwards for discussion. So yes, if you could hold questions till the 15-minute period, that would be great. Are people ready to go?
We are ready, Rachel.
Okay, so I think the technology is working. It's been a while since I've done this. So, okay, so sorry I couldn't be there in person with you all, but I just want to say good evening. My name is Rachel Glickman. I'm an academic support teacher at Academy School. I'm also the parent family engagement liaison at Academy, along with Jody Matulke, our school social worker. And I'm also a researcher, having recently completed my doctorate in education. I just want to take a moment to thank the board and the union and the administration for granting me a sabbatical, which was discussed earlier in this meeting. It's a wonderful opportunity that's provided for in our union contract, in which I was granted the last academic year of 23-24 to conduct research in our local school district and write up my dissertation. So you can see the title of this presentation is about the research I did. And I thought this was really important for really walking you through the process of how I arrived at one of my key recommendations is to adopt a community school model. So the title is Reflecting on Resetting and Reimagining Schools in the Post-Pandemic Context, based on a case study I did right here in our local school district. I also just want to acknowledge what a privilege it has been to be in a position where I've been able to explore the impact of the pandemic on education. Like many of you are aware, this was a super intense time for everyone, but educators never really had an opportunity to really reflect on what had happened during the time of when the pandemic first hit and how schools had changed, how their practices had changed, and how learning and teaching has changed as a result. Also, educators are rarely given the space for this deep level of reflection and centered as experts. So my research sought to do both of those things. So don't be intimidated by the agenda. A lot of this I will breeze through quickly, but I at least wanted to include all these slides in case any of you are research geeks like me and want to go back and dig into any of this a little bit more. And as a teacher, I'll do my best to share what I've learned sort of as a story and a storytelling framework, and also try to make it as interactive as possible given the constraints of being over Zoom this evening. So I'm going to start with just the overview of the research topic and problem, and then get into the context, the research questions, some of the components that go into the literature review, the conceptual framework, how I designed the study, how I analyzed the data I found, and then some of the thematic areas I came up with. But really what I want to focus on is the second column, which is around the discussion about how we can reimagine schools, and the conclusion and recommendations, which points to opportunities to embrace what's called the community school model in Vermont. And then I've incorporated a few slides from the Catamount Community School Collaborative, which I'll talk about a little bit later, just to introduce to you what's going on in other parts of the state and bring you up to speed.
Can I stop you 1 second, please?
Yeah.
Is everyone seeing this on screen, or are you seeing something different?
Deborah, if you go to the top of your screen there, it says Christina's screen. And if you click on Rachel's screen, you can see Rachel's presentation. I'm not sure why Christina's screen is popping up.
Okay, Rachel Glickman I see it now. I'm back to Rachel.
But Christina just X'd out of it, I think.
Oh, okay. I see.
Are we good?
Yeah, we're good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay. So just to start with the overview of the research topic. So as we all recall, the COVID-19 pandemic caused this major disruption to the status quo of teaching back in March of 2020. In the wake of the pandemic, there was really this opportunity to create a new vision for what public education looked like. So these are just some pictures of what that looked like: empty classrooms, a lot of outdoor education, a big emphasis also at that time on social emotional learning. The context of this study, I did research in 3 elementary schools in our district, which serves about 700 students in 42 classrooms. There are about 180 staff members. 70% of the student body in these 3 schools qualify for free and reduced lunch, often used as a national measure of poverty. And we also have an increasing number of what I refer to as minoritized students, including multi-language learners. About 20% of the student population would be considered minoritized population. I broke up my study into 3 different phases, just so when I talked to the research participants, we were very clear about what period of time we were discussing. So the first phase was March 2020, when the pandemic first hit, and schools were immediately closed that spring, all the way through the following year when we had a hybrid approach. So that meant some students came back to school part-time, but there was still a combination of remote and in-person learning, and there was the option for some students to remain fully remote during that phase 1. Phase 2 is August 2021 through June 2022, that school year, when all students returned to full-time in-person school. There was no remote option offered during that time. And some of you might recall, this is when there was a big increase in the incidence of unsafe student behavior. Some students hadn't been in a school setting for as many as 15 months at that time. Schools also took on a lot of responsibilities beyond what maybe traditionally we would ascribe to a school setting, such as monitoring public health data, COVID testing, even becoming vaccination sites, et cetera. And so there was really an emphasis during that time on social emotional learning and providing for academic remediation or what some people have referred to as learning loss during the pandemic. We also had a lot of staffing shortages during that phase 2, and it was really difficult to retain staff. We had pretty large turnover rates. Some schools in my study had as many as a third of the staff leave that year. And families had very limited opportunities to actually interact and participate in school because the school buildings were not open to the public and to families during that period. Phase 3 is really when we returned to school in August 2022 with kind of an expectation to resume school operations as they had existed prior to the pandemic. And people who participated in my study shared a lot of experience about how quickly they realized that things were not going to be the same as they were before. This was a time when we had ESSER funding, so we were adopting a number of new curricula during that time. There was a real emphasis on trying to make up for learning loss and academic achievement of students, yet social emotional needs and incidences of unsafe student behavior continued. Staffing shortages and staff retention continued to be an issue during that time. So these are basically how the questions that frame my study. I wanted to look at how the shift in educational priorities in the context of the pandemic can inform the way schools are reimagined. And I broke this down into 2 sub-questions. One, looking at the experiences of educators during that time period that I laid out. And then the second part of that question was, what ideas and practices have emerged that can improve school-based teaching and learning? So I reviewed a number of bodies of literature to just understand what has already been written on this subject. I provided the context about public education in the nation and in Vermont and our unique history, economy, and politics and culture of our state. And then I delved into various debates on the purpose of public education from educators' perspectives. So this included both pre-pandemic and since the onset of the pandemic. This section of the literature review also included policy reports and state recommendations. And as I began to learn more about community schools, as I analyzed my data and came to the recommendations, I added a section in my literature review about community schools. So basically, the gap that I'm hoping to fill with my study is what have been the experiences of educators. And this included both teachers and school leaders in these 3 elementary schools in our district. And I really wanted to center their expertise to inform how school operations might look in the wake of the pandemic. I also just want to point out here that I had hoped to include paraprofessionals in my pool of participants, but one of the criteria for participation was having been at the same school site since prior to the pandemic. And there was such a high turnover rate of paraprofessionals from prior to the 2019-2020 school year until when I was conducting my study, that there were very few people who were actually even met the criteria to participate from the paraprofessional pool. So I did develop a conceptual framework for my study. And basically, the way that this looks, I introduced this actually at a presentation I gave in October around family engagement. Because the way that I developed my conceptual framework was really around this idea that we had some traditional ideas about the role of school and the role of home going into the pandemic. Not to say that there wasn't overlap or gray areas, but there was a more distinct roles between those two. So the left side of this graphic you'll see points to that. And these are also some of the foundational ideas in those gray areas that inform the way that public schools operate in our society. So education for the economy really draws on human capital theory ideas around education as workforce development. Education for democracy really draws on John Dewey's ideas about the importance of civic engagement in education and promoting the idea of community responsibility. And then I also pulled on a lot of Freirean models of education as an emancipatory practice whereby people are able to fully realize their potential through education. The center of this graphic is the sort of the convergence point, which I have labeled as when the COVID pandemic hit, and there was really a collapse of what we traditionally thought of as the role of school and the role of home. So school, prior to the pandemic, mostly, of course, we had all kinds of alternative education pedagogies prior to the pandemic as well, but those weren't as often embraced as they were once the pandemic hit. So you can see coming out on the other side, we had a lot more outdoor education taking place. There was a high emphasis on place-based education, project-based learning, and of course, social emotional learning and whole child development. So those more distinct roles of school and home really took on a different form coming out of the pandemic, and that is illustrated in the right side of this graphic. So those sort of colored strips you see are some of the other theoretical bases of that approach, where education for liberation is really about moving beyond just emancipation and liberating others from oppression, unlearning harmful ways of being in the world, which is many of the cases of outdoor education was about the interdependence of students and the education system with our natural environment and the impact that we have on it, and folding that into the pedagogy. And education for envisioning draws on a lot of indigenous knowledges about how schools and learning can be more than just what happens within a school and more interconnected with the natural world and the wider community. So this was a framework I developed specifically for this study. Pretty simple graphic here. I just wanted to illustrate that this was a combination of a case study and an action research project. So the purpose of the case study was to contextualize my research in a specific place and time. And then the second part was the action research component, which allows for opportunities to address issues that were unearthed during the research project in the hope of leading to actual concrete and material improvements. And I do have some examples of some of those improvements that took place during the course of the research. Participants, I did a recruitment process where I went around to all of the different school sites that were part of my study. I talked to people in staff meetings. I sent out emails. It was a self-selected voluntary research project. And the people who ultimately chose to participate and met the criteria, having been at their school site since the 2019-2020 school year, were 16 educators, which included 2 educational leaders, 10 classroom teachers, 4 enrichment teachers, which I'm referring to like music, art, PE, world languages, those teachers that provide those enrichment classes in school, special educators, and academic support teachers. There was a real range of experience among the group of participants. There are teachers who had taught as few as 8 years and as many as 24 years. And then I just have laid out the 2 methods of collecting data, which were interviews and focus groups. So ultimately, I did about 25 hours of interviews and focus groups. Okay, so with about 400 pages of transcripts, the next phase was figuring out how to manage and analyze all the data. So all of the interviews and focus groups were recorded, transcribed. I removed any identifiable information to protect the anonymity of the participants. Participants were assigned pseudonyms. And then I went through a reflective thematic analysis process using a software called In Vivo for coding to come up with the themes that I generated for my findings. Okay, so that's kind of the nuts and bolts of how the research project took place. And now I think we're going to get to the part that most people are interested in, which is what did I actually find out? So these were the key findings that stemmed from the first sub-research question about educators' experiences. These fell under basically three main areas, which included the growing breadth of responsibilities, schools as provisioning basic needs for families and students, the need to remediate for academic loss following school closure, having to really renegotiate the relationship between home and school. Obviously, that relationship became very close when schools first closed for families that were able to engage in school. And then it became very fractured when schools reopened because families weren't actually allowed to be in the building. And we also saw a rapid and pretty profound increase in social emotional needs of the students. So that all fell within the theme of growing breadth of responsibilities that educators were experiencing. As I alluded to prior, there were a number of challenges with staffing. There were shortages of staffing, insufficiently trained staff. It was hard to retain teachers. Everyone was stressed out. So it was hard also to maintain commitment among staff. And overall, the morale really was pretty low at this period in time when school reopened for all students during that year of 2022-23. There was also growing demands and competing demands for educators' time and attention. So we had a number of new curricula were adopted. We had growing student needs. We had new data management systems that some found frustrating. We had new ways of reporting on our report cards, and we had new standards that were adopted during this time as well. And all of this was taking place during some pretty politically tumultuous times, as we might recall as well. So educators were also trying to navigate all the socio-political forces going on in the greater society around us. So I have a big arrow here that's basically pointing to some quotes. So this is the audience participation part of the evening. And if anyone feels brave, I have some quotes from participants. And as I said, these are pseudonyms. So these are not identifiable people, but these are actual real quotes from participants. Would anyone like to read the first quote from Carol? No, I think people are being shy.
It makes me emotional thinking about the tumult, the huge shift over the past few years. Am I getting the support I need, or do I need more?
Thank you, Deborah. The second quote is from Bess, who's a classroom teacher. She talked about how we have fewer trained staff and we were not trained to do this job the way we have to. Would anyone like to be Wendy? The next quote.
If we sold our house, could I stop working?
Yeah. So that last quote really points to sort of the desperation educators were feeling during different times of the pandemic. And most of this was around the time I was actually collecting the data. So this was from the last school year, not the current one that we're in, but the 22-23 school year. So there were people who were really looking for a way out of the profession. One thing that really surprised me about conducting these interviews, the individual interviews, is how emotional it was. I was expecting that people would have a lot to tell me, but I wasn't expecting so many people to break down crying, and that happened more often than not. So the next sort of bucket of findings falls under the other sub-research question, which was about ideas and practices to improve teaching and learning. And these are the main areas that the participants spoke about. They really felt that we needed to just reset school operations. We couldn't come back after this really tumultuous, disruptive experience and expect things to be the way they were. They wanted to see more communication and celebration, a shared vision. People felt very fractured, that like we weren't all on the same page. Better communication and collaboration among staff, sort of reconsidering how we engage with families and strengthening that connection between home and school, and focusing on assets rather than just deficits. So really celebrating successes. Also, a lot of participants had felt that they had learned a lot and really tried some new pedagogy during the time when schools had gone hybrid and remote, and they wanted the opportunity to keep doing those things. So this is what I refer to as alternative educational approaches. So a lot of educators had really embraced project-based learning, place-based education, outdoor education during that time, and they didn't want to see that go away. So there was a lot of emphasis on let's not throw away sort of, you know, the old saying, the baby with the bathwater. Let's hold on to what was working. There are a number of people who thought that we should start or at least consider running our own in-district therapeutic program. There was a mention earlier in the board meeting about the percentage increase to the special ed budget because of out-of-district placements. And a lot of people I spoke with felt that we had a population of students in our district, enough people, students who needed that type of service, that we could actually run or consider running a program within the district. Other ideas that came up was just having flexible grouping, so multi-age groups based on specific skills that students needed, rather just sort of running schools the way they had been prior to the pandemic, just by grade level bands in classrooms, and having more autonomy and flexibility over instructional approaches based on the needs of the students. And recapturing the joy of teaching. And this was a lot about just assets-based teaching and learning, because there was so much negativity, especially on the national level and international level, even when kids came back to school, just about the dire learning loss that had taken place during that time, and really reframing it in terms of resilience and what kids had actually this remarkable time period that they had lived through, and what they had learned during that time period, and not just what they had lost. Before I get to the red text about building community connections, because that's my segue to community schools, I just also want to highlight some of the action research outcomes. So as an action research project, I wanted to actually realize some of the ideas that came out during the research project itself. So some of the changes that took place were around food ordering. We talked a little bit about the proposal that will be discussed tomorrow. There are a lot of issues around how food ordering took place, how food was delivered, nutrition issues about students being fed adequately, the right amount of food, all kinds of snafus. And of course, this all linked in with staffing shortages in the kitchens as well. But some changes were made to try to help with that during this time. There were some scheduling changes made to better support students in need of specialized services. That happened mid-year at one of the school sites in my study. There was a real concerted effort to get more substitutes hired in the district, which really helped, because there was definitely a period of time when there were not enough subs to cover educators when they were absent from the work site. And my study led to some cross-school site collaboration that hadn't existed prior. And then just back to this text in red about building community connections. This was one of the main themes. A lot of participants in my study really felt that so much had fallen on the shoulders of the public schools, that we really needed to do a better job of forming partnerships with community-based organizations and rebalancing sort of the responsibility of what schools have taken on since the onset of the pandemic with the mission and also the expertise of others in the community. So the next few slides, there are a few more quotes from participants before we move on to the community schools. So these are around ideas for improving teaching and learning. So a classroom teacher shared, the purpose of school is learning, but how and what we learn is different. Through COVID, we have realized different needs and strengths. So that really summed up that we need to be not just looking at what students lost during that time, but also what they had gained. Another classroom teacher talking about the extreme social emotional needs of her students said, we are failing some of our most vulnerable and fragile kids by not getting them the specialized support, referring to therapeutic setting that they need. And then Kai, a classroom teacher, pointed out that schools are not only designed to educate our students as far as academics, but also we're teaching them how to be part of a community. So that last quote leads me to the final recommendations and findings from my study, which is in this sort of blue triangle over on the right side of the figure. So what I was recommending that we do next is that we recognize that the educators' roles have grown beyond their expertise and capacity, and that they really need to return to their main function of their job as educational instructors. In order to do that, we need to redefine the division of responsibilities among staff. And one way we might get there is by partnering with community organizations, creating a unified vision, which includes not just the students and the staff and families, but also the larger community. And a framework for achieving this might be through a community school model, which is designed as a education reform measure for creating a more just public education system. So a community school, for those of you who are not familiar with this term, it's a place and set of partnerships that connect the school, the family of students, and the surrounding community, and integrates academics, youth development, family support, health and social services, and community development. It's actually been around since around the 1990s. It started in urban areas, and it was really built during this time period when a lot of schools were being shut down by the state, and they really wanted to prove that they could rebuild from the ground up by really drawing in their community assets and providing wraparound services for students and families. And there's been some great successes. I was at a community school conference in Philadelphia in November, and one of the school sites we visited is actually was the inspiration for the show Abbott Elementary. If those of you are familiar with that show, but that is one of the schools that became a model school in the Philadelphia area. This idea of adopting a community school model is somewhat new for a rural context, and Vermont is sort of on the leading edge of that movement right now. So the theory behind which I wanted to embrace this model was around this French-Austrian theorist named André Gortz in the 1960s, who talked about how we can achieve major societal transformations by taking incremental steps. It doesn't really need to just always come down to revolution. And he called this non-reformist reform. So it's a mean of working within existing structures to move towards revolutionary change incrementally. So the existing structure here being our public school system and the government that the state and federal government that sets policies around education as well. So recommendations, I want to just jump down to the ones that are in red, which point to partnering with community-based organizations and creating a unified vision. The next few slides are from the Catamount Community School Collaborative, which is based up at UVM, just to give you a little bit of framework for the community school model. So as I mentioned, community schools really started in urban areas, and Vermont's on the leading edge of developing a community school framework in a rural setting. So community schools are not singular programs or strategies. They're really a fundamental way of rethinking how public education is delivered or how we do school. I know that earlier Tim referred to the education quality standards. And so community schools really align with the education quality standards and student-centered approaches to learning and existing regulatory framework for education. So we already have a number of laws in Vermont about how education should operate in our state, and it's a way of bringing those regulatory frameworks together in this one model. They're designed really to close equity gaps around provision of services, resources, and opportunities for students. We're all familiar that if students and families' basic needs are not met, they can't access their education. So this is a framework for ensuring that those needs are met. And because this is a model specifically for the state of Vermont, it really draws on Vermont's unique context and history. And we're a state that does value place-based education, relationships, the assets of our rural communities. A lot of communities in Vermont, and I think this is true in our district too, the schools are one of the most important institutions and one of sort of the heartbeat of some of our more rural communities as well. So schools should be seen as community centers and a co-location of services, not just for students, but for families and the wider community. So the community school approach is organized under 5 pillars, and nationally there are 4 pillars, but Vermonters are overachievers, so they added a 5th. But it's really around this idea of integrating student supports, expanded and enriched learning time and opportunities, which means after school and summer programs, active family and community engagement with what's happening in our schools and vice versa, and collaborative leadership and practice. And then the 5th one that was added for the state of Vermont is around safe, inclusive, and equitable learning opportunities and environments. And I just want to point that one out specifically because inclusion is especially important in our district with a growing number of new Vermonters moving to our community and really making sure that we're set up to ensure that those students are safe and included in all the opportunities that we offer through our schools. Just a brief timeline, if you're wondering where this idea came from, and maybe you haven't heard of it, I hadn't heard of it either until I started my research. So there was actually a law that was passed in 2021, the Vermont Act 67, which was the Community Schools Act. It was signed into law in June of that year. And this established a relationship between the University of Vermont and the Vermont Agency of Education for implementing this law. The following year, there was a partnership developed, a research practice partnership developed between the Agency of Education and UVM. And they really started to outline in more detail what kind of research and technical assistance and funding they could provide to pilot schools. They also had a competitive grant process with ESSER funds, in which 5 different districts and schools around the state of Vermont applied and received funding at that time to pilot community school models in their areas of the state. In 2023, there was increased visibility through some publications from UVM faculty, and they also started to get their information out there at a national stage, attending national conferences around state education policy development and being part of those national networks. And this has brought in actually additional resources, which is now where we are in 2024, where UVM has now accessed other sources of funding, not just appropriations through the state legislature, but external funding as well through the U.S. Department of Education, as well as some other grant funds. And they are starting a second cohort of pilot schools around the state. So this is the first cohort. So this was the first round of competitive funding that was available through ESSER funds. And you can see those 5 stars are all in the northern half of the state, which those of you who have worked with Montpelier might say, well, that's often how it ends up. And so I am really advocating that they bring some of these resources down to our southern part of the state and make sure that we're part of these efforts as well. I had the opportunity when I was in Philadelphia to meet the team from UVM and the Agency of Education, and they just now launched another competitive round of grant funding that we are working on currently. How's my time? If we're almost out of time, I can skip the testimonials from the pilot sites. Does anyone have a sense?
So I would say, why don't you skip it?
Okay, that's fine.
If you don't mind.
Yeah, that's fine. This is my last slide, except for the references. So I just want to, the next steps, please go back and watch the testimonials. I think you'll find them really interesting. They're basically interviews with teachers and administrators who have been part of the pilot programs about what those programs have done for their districts and their schools in other parts of the state. So go back and watch that if you can. But just to let you know where we are right now. We're currently applying for a Community School Foundations grant, which is through the Agency of Education to become part of a second cohort of pilot sites. I presented to the district leadership team and 2 principals identified, John Sessions and Kelly Diaz at Academy and Putney Central have expressed interest in being included in that grant application. So John, Kelly, Paul Smith, and I have been working on that application. Turnaround is quick. It's we have to have it in by the 20th. This is funding actually just for the current fiscal year. So the timeline is a bit unfortunate because it would be great if it was for the next fiscal year, but it's really funds to be expended this spring. However, there is additional funding, as I mentioned, that will be available. They're using a braided funding model to expand community school work. And so the Catamount Community School Collaborative has already secured funding to sustain those programs all the way through the next 3 years. So I put a link on the slideshow. I don't know if it's possible to make this slideshow available to people here, but that you can certainly access more information through that link and contact me. And here's just a list of references from the different sources that I used in this presentation.
Rachel, if you send this slideshow directly to me, I'll have it put on our website tomorrow morning.
Great. Thanks, Mark.
Really great job tonight.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to stop my sharing. And now, oh, it looks like I did it with only 1 minute over. So we can move on to discussion.
This is perfect. Wow, Rachel, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Open for discussion. Jody Normando from Dummerston.
Thank you very much, Rachel. That's fantastic. One question for you. Have you been in contact with this group that's doing this community this thing for public education, rural public education in the state, because I think that that would be a really good place to make a presentation now, because they're going to be taking stuff. They already sent stuff to the legislature this year.
I'm not sure if you're referring to the Community School Collaborative or a different group.
It's the one that was set up by the legislature last year, and I forget the whole name, but it's to talk about the future of education.
Oh, yes. Yes. I have been in touch with them. Yeah, actually, I think David Scholes is on that group, and he has connected me with that group. Yes, they're very aware of this, and they are actually they're definitely big supporters of this approach, and it is part of the platform that they're putting forward.
Well, it would be a lot better than what some of the other education systems in Vermont are doing. So thank you very much for sending it to them too. We're talking to them. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Sean?
Yeah, this has been very interesting, Rachel. Thank you very much. And a lot of the things that you described, community-based schools, I think this district would be poised to adopt a lot of them because there is some history there. As an example is the Four Winds Nature Institute. I was a Four Winds volunteer for 5 years, and I know a lot of the schools in the district. And that was a beautiful example of actually community people going in and being able to meet with the students and to work with the students. So I think that, you know, what you're proposing really does have some foundation in the district. Sounds like you'll be building on it, which is fantastic. And then my other comment was when my students were in school, my children were in school here, one of the big things were programs like the dance program at the through the Career Center and athletic programs, you know, all sports of all different kinds, and how that drew the community into schools. So I was wondering if you have any comment on that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree, first of all, that yes, I think we are definitely really well positioned to take on this work. And it's not to say that this hasn't happened. Of course, we all know that we have very vibrant communities in our district, and we've had historically, a lot of volunteer programs that have included community members in our schools. But there has been definitely a major setback with the pandemic. And since coming back to schools, most of the experiences have been kind of patching the holes in the ship or putting on band-aids as problems arise. And it's been very much reacting to issues as they have come up versus having an actual coordinated, strategic, intentional plan with how we re-engage with community-based organizations and families. So the first phase of should we get this funding, the very first phase of the funding is doing a needs assessment and assets mapping. So it's like, you know, looking what we have in our local community, where partnerships are ready, you know, people and organizations that are ready to form more formal partnerships, and also looking at the needs, because that has also changed drastically over the past 5 years, certainly past 10 to 15 years. But I also just want to add, part of my interest and passion in this comes from being a teacher at Academy School, and I work with 6th graders, so they're the oldest grade at elementary level, and we really work hard to get our 6th graders out in the community. And we now have somebody who helps us in an outreach coordinator capacity part-time with reaching out and organizing field trips and bringing in guest speakers. But before we had someone in that position, it really fell on teachers and educators to make those connections. And we placed that was a real priority of my team, of my group of educators working with 6th graders. And I have to say, every time we reached out, people were thrilled. I mean, they were so excited because most of these organizations working with public school kids aligns directly with their mission. So to have the opportunity to engage with the public school population through different community-based, place-based education opportunities, I was never once turned away. But it takes a lot of work, and that's above and beyond what educators already have on their shoulders right now. So that's why I think a community school model, and also pointing out, I'm well aware that we are in fiscally, you know, I don't want to use the word dire, that might sound too scary, but we all know the fiscal situation for education funding in Vermont. But these are resources that are not currently tapped by our district, that are available, already secured, and they will go to other schools and districts around the state if we don't pursue them. So this isn't going to affect our taxpayers in our local district. If anything, it will bring in more resources to our local district to start to take some of the burden off of our schools and assuming so many of the responsibilities that have fallen on the schools over the last 5 years.
So one of the issues that strikes me in talking to friends who are still teaching, there was a lot of chatter during the pandemic that as teachers, as educators, we had to change how we teach because it was a different world. And the lessons learned were supposed to be continued post-pandemic. Too frequently, that has not taken place. And we've gone back to old models. And I think about a colleague, the rush for assessments as the semester is ending, the burden on students, the burden on teachers, the absolute exhaustion. And we were in the same workshop with the Listen and Learn tour. And there were comments about different ways of assessing a student's education, critical thinking, reading skills, that too frequently are not taking place. I think we're very concerned about what has been lost and this rush to catch up. I don't know how you ever catch up. You move forward from where you are right now. And one key word that you mentioned is autonomy. And autonomy is a way of retaining teachers, of engaging teachers, of exciting them about what they're doing in the classroom. And that at that AOE presentation, Listen and Learn, when Jill Campbell Briggs was within the first 5 minutes, she said that the AOE strategic plan was, and I'm not paraphrasing, it was less freedom, more unity. And that made me very nervous about bureaucratic structure and top-down approach.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really interesting, and it really is about looking at the whole student, looking at this young person as a person more than just someone trapped in a classroom. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Deborah?
Yes, Tim.
I can't raise my hand, so let me just talk. So I read a lot of most of your dissertation, Rachel, and when reading it, I was thinking, what did the board do from 2021 to 2023? So we were embroiled in a lot of pretty serious issues. But one thing that we were not engaged in much was direct engagement with teaching staff. And I believe since the pandemic, we still are not engaged engaged enough with teachers. We understood during that time the challenges, the low morale, the staff issues, but not to any serious degree or depth that you present in your dissertation. We touch occasionally on the alternative pedagogies, but not at all in the detail that you present. The need for alternative ways of teaching is just not seriously discussed. It hasn't been seriously discussed. We were told of the changes in the EL and math curricula, but we never really fully understood the pressure, the tremendous pressure that changing curricula put on the staff. Mm-hmm. And as Deborah mentioned, we know that autonomy and independent decision making is so critically important, not just for retention, but to allow the students to do what they do the best, teach individuals in their classroom. Yet we don't have the powerful understanding that you have from your research. Perhaps before the merger, boards were more engaged with teachers, but I think we've lost that engagement to a large degree. I mentioned the Leadership Council meeting that we just had at BAMS, and we are talking about ways to show appreciation to the teachers. A couple of the teaching staff on that committee emphasized, yeah, the food is going to be great, but tell the board members to visit our classrooms to see what we do. That's appreciation when we can do that. And that was the same message I got at the AOE session with the staff. Afterwards, I was talking to staff members, and they said, "Board members, we rarely see you. Come to your classrooms." So I think what we as a board need to do our jobs better, to support students better, is to support teachers better by really understanding deeply in depth their experiences and their challenges and their successes. So that's one thing I've gotten out of reading your dissertation and this presentation. And I hope that it's a message that the board can continue to kick around. So my last comment is a question. What more can the board do to support the teachers and in particular the community schools initiative?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for reading my dissertation. I think you're now one of maybe 10 people who has. So.
It's compelling. It's a good read.
Thank you. I think you're absolutely on the right track. I think that what I found just from conducting the research is I was really surprised at how relieved, because these are my peers. There's no like power hierarchy here, but at just how relieved teachers were at being heard. I feel like the overall sentiment was that they were not even aware that the experiences that they were having were shared across schools, for example. And so just having the focus groups were the second part of my data collection, and just having a focus groups where people could talk to each other at different grade levels, in different roles across schools, and coming to the realization that what they were experiencing wasn't unique to them. Was a huge relief. And also it led to some actual concrete changes. And that's how change happens. When people are, isolated, it's really hard to create change. I was lucky enough to be on the ad hoc committee that's proposed the independent food service proposal, which will be considered tomorrow. And that is a perfect example of like cross-school, cross-role collaboration. We had almost, people from all around the district, principals, teachers, people in food services, and just having different roles all around the same table sharing those experiences was incredibly powerful. And we came up with real solutions, and hopefully we'll move forward with those real solutions. So yeah, I think having that level of discourse with the people who are in the school every day on the front lines with students is super important. And part of what we can do to support the community school model is it is inherently that. It's opening up the schools in a way that builds public trust in education. Because a lot of times, unless you have children in the school, you haven't stepped foot in a school building maybe for years. And so it develops this wariness among voters and taxpayers of if their money is being well spent. And I think if we have more ability to open up the schools, invite people in as volunteers, after school programs, tutors, even evening activities, which aren't formally, formal school sponsored events, just to get people in the buildings, just looking at the bulletin boards on the wall, it builds public trust in the education system. And we're up against a lot in the coming years. I mean, there will be active efforts to erode as much public trust in public institutions as possible. So I think this is a way that we can do something at a very local level to try to counterbalance some of that.
Deborah, you're muted.
Thank you so much. I keep on saying Christina. Christina.
So I lowered my hand because I wanted to allow board members to speak. I think Eva's hand's up, so I will respectfully delay my comments.
All right. Okay. Eva Nolan.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. Educators, professionals, I mean, maintenance, anybody can come to a board meeting and state a comment or an observation. If you watch board meetings across the state, teachers are always speaking up at board meetings. So I don't speak for the whole entire board, but I welcome teachers and educators to come to our board meetings and speak to the budget, speak to things here, because there's such a silence. I can't remember the last time I heard from an educator speaking up at a board meeting about really anything. So I just wanted to welcome that invitation.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you. Christina.
There being no board members left to speak. Thank you, Rachel Glickman. That was filled with so much information that I'm still processing late in the night in the Christmas season. But I think it really struck me hearing the voices of teachers and hearing what they were going through in a situation where their names were not covered. And I think we all had a sense that was going on. But it brings my brain to where I was raised in industry during total quality management, where that came back to the United States. It's an American idea that is now making its way to education, having been in the business world, which is management and administration is there to empower the people doing the job and listening to them. And I think this is a perfect example of what I learned in the 80s in industry, which is now embraced in education, is that you have to hear from the voices of the people doing the jobs and from the students, from the parents, and from the teachers. And so this opportunity to hear what teachers have been through was really informative, and I think it's going to affect board members and help them think going forward. And I think helping us figure out how to put Vermont's strength, which is in its community, to addressing those needs is super powerful. And so I can't be more articulate than that, but I do feel like the tenets of total quality are alive and well here, and I'm seeing it in action. And I've been doing, professional work for 40 years. So it's really great these topics keep coming up. So thank you for bringing this in front of the board, in front of the public, and helping us think more about how to serve our students and community.
Thank you.
Jody, you have your hand up.
Yes, I do. I agree with what everybody has said now. And I also agree with Rachel that there are things that are coming down the pike now, and we need to be able to keep our education as good as it is now and better. Teachers need to be able to teach, and there has been so much put on them by the state that I think they're just overwhelmed. And I'm wondering, Rachel, if you've taken your research a little bit further to see how you can get some of this funding into just teaching and get some of it out into some other form of money from the state, like the general fund or whatever, or the social services fund, and relieving the teachers so they can teach and not have to do everything else. I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Jody. Yeah, I would just say to that and also to Eva's point earlier, I'm a teacher. I'm here at school every day teaching kids. And so there's just only so much energy any one person has. And I think that's why teachers are not coming to board meetings. I mean, people are just spent, completely spent. You will see people hopefully there tomorrow, because there are a lot of people who feel very passionately about the independent food services proposal. But I think teachers, for the most part, are really having to be very targeted with where they put their energies, because the job has become more and more demanding over the last, I would say, 5 or 10 years. Certainly, I've been at Academy School for 10 years, and my job has changed tremendously over that time. And in terms of getting more resources into from the general fund or other into teaching specifically, I can't make promises to that, but I will say if we are awarded this grant funds, we will be part of a cohort, and we will be networked in with what's happening at a state level like we haven't been up until this point. So when I first found out about Act 67 and the first wave of pilot programs that started around that time, I asked in central office if anyone knew about it, and they didn't know about it. And I honestly, I don't fault our central office at all. I don't think the state did a good job of doing outreach to other parts of the state either. But once we're part of a network, then we will know when these other opportunities come down the line. And it will be a real advocacy group that will be advocating at a state level for more resources for education without, further exacerbating the tax situation that we're in currently, thinking creatively about how we can support public education and maybe rethink the way that we finance our schools.
Okay, I'm going to call on Ruby, and then I think we're going to move forward. Ruby?
Well, first, I just would like to say, Rachel, thank you so much for bringing this to us. I think you've done a wonderful job, and I appreciate you very, very much. Your voice is really refreshing. And thank you to Mark Spino for creating a space where you could actually do this and focus on it. I love that. I just want to say I wear lots of hats in my life, and one of them is as the head of a collaborating organization that works with Putney Central School, which has been working since John Sessions took the helm as a community school, in my opinion, and is one of the schools that's working with Rachel and in the district trying to think about that grant proposal. So I just want to acknowledge that I come at this not just as a board member, and so I want to like make that known. But I would really like to just in I invite you to really think about whether you give it to us now or you bring it back later, like really that question that I think Tim asked, what can we do now? Like, what do you need from us? I think it's like a no-brainer. Like this is the future. Let's go here. And so then as board members in our role as governance focused, what can we do to support moving forward? My immediate thought in that, I go back to when we've gone to VSBA, VSA conferences. There are presentations and like little workshops that are driven by schools and have administrators and teachers and leading conversations. And I think potentially, whether we get this grant or not, I think we should start to see ourselves as people that can be leading that conversation, because I think the work that you're doing is innovative. It is really, really, really important. And I think you have a whole district that is behind you. So how can we position ourselves to be at the head of that conversation, really leading that conversation? I think that you are well poised to do that. That's one way that we as board members could participate in that conversation. But ultimately, I just hope that this isn't the last that we as board members are hearing of it. So that's all I have to say, is just deep appreciation and thanks.
Well, thank you. And hopefully you'll hear more when we all come back in January, because they should be awarding the grants early January. So we'll know soon. But I agree, with a grant or not, I hope that this is not the end of the conversation. I will do my best to make sure it's not.
Well, I'm going to also work very hard to make sure that this is not the end of the conversation. I am a career teacher, and you're right, the world has changed. I started in the South Bronx with with young adults who were the first generation of crack babies. And the classrooms were quite intense. I learned a lot about classroom management, a lot of professional development, for air that you mentioned, and a lot of off the beaten track um, classroom management techniques to engage young people. Um, and the public school that I taught in the heart of the South Bronx, was off the beaten track. 300 students, a daycare center for the babies of my students, and 30 teachers. So 300 students, 30 teachers, with at least a third of the population absent every day. Um, and yet yearning for that high school diploma because that's part of the American dream. So I think grassroots is really critically important. I think that this was a phenomenal evening. This was a phenomenal presentation, and it makes me yearn to hear the experiences of teachers in our district, of paraprofessionals in our district, of custodians in our district, of staff working in kitchens in our district, for people to come to board meetings, for them to speak about their concerns, brief spotlight on what that individual is doing. And it should be, penalty free. People should be able to speak their minds, knowing that their immediate supervisor is listening, but we want it to be penalty free, and um, that's a big charge. I do realize that. I this was an amazing evening. Thank you very, very much. A long overdue moment. And it cannot just be a moment. This is what we have to be about as a board. I'm taking the words of Eva Nolan and Tim Maciel and Ruby McAdoo and others. This is what we should be about. So, and Sean Murphy's words as well. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Um, and we need you to keep us posted about next steps. Okay, every step of the way. Thank you very, very much. And now it's 8:30, and we are just about at the end of this board meeting. So, Mark Spino, are there any issues, hires, resignations, retirements that we should know about?
No resignations or retirements or new hires to announce tonight. I will share just a quick reflection of Rachel's tremendous report tonight is that we're not starting from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much in place within our school district and within our schools. And it's about the work that we do as a collection of all of us together. So I think we're in a really good place as a school district to continue to move forward and move the momentum forward. So thank you, Rachel, for your presentation tonight. Please send me that slideshow and I will get it up on the website tomorrow morning so folks can look at it more closely. Last thing I'll just share, there was a discussion around the Listen and Learn tour. I'll just give a brief kind of overview. AOE leadership came down to visit us on December 3rd. We hosted them at BUHS, led by Deputy Secretary Jill Briggs Gamble. There were two sessions in place for the night, a 4:30 session for educators. We had about 40 or so, maybe close to 50 educators show up. And then there was a 6 o'clock session designed for the general public, where we had about 30 community members participate. So I would say it was fairly successful. I wasn't sure Part of me was thinking we'd have more participation, but then a part of me was not surprised. It was a cold December night, and not everybody wants to come out for an evening. But all in all, I think, especially with the educators, it was a really good attendance. Um, Protocols for the evening were essentially small group discussions to identify community priorities moving forward. So there were lots of comments. Um, I think it's going to be hard to develop a strategic plan from all of these listen and learn tours. I can imagine they're generating lots of data. So I guess it'll be interesting to see what the trends are and how that data is reported. Um, but we did get an opportunity to participate, which was nice. I think there are some remote opportunities in the future, um, and those can be found on the AOE website. And I believe in my emails announcing the opportunity to participate, I have shared some links to track those opportunities.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Thank you. I'm going to move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda, including the minutes of November 26th?
So moved.
So moved. Seconded.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Indicate by saying no. Any abstentions? Okay, moving on to unfinished business. The Policy and Amendment Committee presents the following for a second reading. F21, Policy on the Use of Restraint and Seclusion. F29, Multilingual Learners. And as so many of you know, if you have any concerns or questions, please send us an email, any one of the board members, and they will get it to members on the policy committee. Policy committee meets tomorrow at 2 o'clock. We continue our work. And it will be in January that these two policies will come before the board for a motion for readoption. So certainly not next week. That's not a 10-day period of time. Is there any additional business this evening before the board?
Deborah, can I
Chair.
chime in really quick?
Hannah Parker, absolutely. Thank you.
I appreciate everyone looking at my bald husband all night. Sorry, it wasn't me, but I just wanted to share that I'm looking up the date right now to make sure I have the date correct. But December 18th starting at 6:30 is the BUHS Honors Concert. And I would strongly encourage any board member and community member to come and participate and watch, because we had four quartet singing groups come around the school during passing time and in the hallways to practice for their weekend recital this past weekend, and they are outstanding. And I would hate for others to not have the opportunity to see them sing. I felt a little spoiled last week.
Okay, so that is December, I'm sorry, that's December 18
It's December 18th at 6:30.
at 6:30. Okay, and it's in the auditorium. And December 18th, we happen to have an SU meeting.
Oh.
So
Well, not everyone's on the SU board.
no, not everyone is on the SU board. There are very few of us on the SU board, but I'm on the SU board.
That's a bummer because it's a very good concert.
Maybe well, I won't say that I have to attend the SU meeting, don't I?
Yes, you do.
I do. Okay, there we go. Okay, Ruby, you have your hand up.
Hannah, thanks for raising this or opportunity. Can you let us know if there are tickets or some way in which we need to, or can we just show up?
Just show up. Yes, we would love to see as many people in the audience.
Great. Thank you.
So maybe, Ruby, you can spread the word through Facebook, or does BUHS?
I can share what goes up on Facebook. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great. Let's spread the word and get people at this concert. That would be great.
Thank you.
Oh, and maybe we could have a really, well, a short SU meeting so we could find our way to just a short walk to BUHS for this concert. What a nice way of ending an evening. Thank you. Okay, Sean, you got a thumbs up. I thought it was a hand, but it's a thumbs up, right? Uh, Anything else, ladies and gentlemen? And so,
Madam
can I,
Chair, there being no further business before this board, I move that we adjourn.
is there a second?
Seconded.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, please indicate by saying no. Any abstentions? We are adjourned at 8:39 this evening. Thank you very much. This was an amazing Zoom only session. Wow. Thank you. Got a lot done tonight.